here's our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. Let's begin today's program with a spotlight on relations between the world's top two economies, China and the United States. They have been each other's largest trading partner for years, but China lost its spot as the biggest exporter of goods to the U.S. last year, a result of U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war with China. Geopolitical tensions flare up again amid the COVID-19 pandemic, more uncertainty with the U.S. headed for November elections. What are the dangers of the ties between the two reaching a historic low? Earlier, I talked to Thomas Friedman, a columnist of the New York Times. He recently wrote an article that for the past 40 years, the two countries had an unconscious economic coupling, in his words. But now, he said, China and America are heading toward a divorce. Is it true? Take a listen. You've been arguing there's a divorce, quote unquote, between China and the United States. You always use a funny language and also attractive way to attract people's attention. But, you know, Mr. Friedman, tell me more about exactly which stage do you think China and U.S. is, their relationship?
Well, we're meeting with our lawyers right now.
Who are our lawyers, Mr. Friedman? I'm looking forward to meeting them, too.
Divorce lawyers. The U.S. and China, if the world is going to thrive in the 21st century, it can only thrive with certainly a minimum and hopefully a maximum of U.S.-China collaboration. I believe that the economic ties and the diplomatic collaboration between the U.S. and China between 1979 and 2019, that 4-decade period, produced so much of the prosperity, was an engine for so much prosperity and for so much global stability for the last 4 decades. And if we fracture that, we will be a less prosperous world and we'll be a less stable and secure world. So both sides have grievances with the other. What is missing right now is a kind of minimal level of trust and dialogue. Find areas where we can cooperate to limit the fallout of the disagreements. In my time following U.S.-China relations, which is, for several decades, I don't remember a time when there was less trust in the relationship. The majority, I believe, the majority in both countries, though, really benefited from, enjoyed, and want to see continue the kind of economic collaboration, the kind of tourism, the kind of student travel, the kind of diplomatic engagement around big issues called climate change. That's where the majority is, I believe, in China and in America. But right now, it's actually not the majorities that are driving the relationship.
Mm-hmm. But then the question naturally is, how can we avoid let the minority kidnap the overall nature of this relationship?
Well, it's going to, I believe, I don't know what is a sufficient way, but I know what is necessary from the American side.
Okay.
I won't speak to the Chinese side. You know better, but on the American side, we need a different president with a different national security team that acts on what has been the traditional American approach with China, which is build bridges where possible, cooperate wherever we can, and draw red lines where we disagree. And there's still a huge necessity for us to work together. But at the same time, I will tell you, there is a level of mistrust in the relationship.
Yeah.
As a journalist, I'll tell you, the New York Times has basically been virtually thrown out of China, except one reporter. Same with the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal.
I would say the same thing about CCTV and CGTN now being listed as so-called a foreign entity rather than media organizations. Well, obviously, two sides have different views. Go ahead.
Our countries are too big and too important to the whole fate of the world for us to have any other strategy. So we can't actually get divorced. You know why? Because we're actually Siamese twins. We are actually connected. Okay? And what you have when two Siamese twins try to get a divorce, that's kind of what's going on right now.
Yeah. I was trying to read some of your columns earlier about China-U.S. relations. I was also looking at some of the articles by some thinkers like Mr. Fukuyama with his recent piece on China-U.S. relations. We see actually some strong voices also from where you are talking about there is not enough reasons for a quote-unquote natural decoupling between the two countries, China and the United States, just as you argued earlier. So right now, our rhetorics, and particularly rhetorics invented by a few, driving us apart, are the picture really that bad as being portrayed in the media? Now, no offense to our trade, right? We are all in the media, but you know, to talk about it as a whole, Mr. Friedman, your thoughts? Are we being told that we are so much apart, or actually we are really apart?
Very good question. It's a very good question, and I would say the answer is yes and no. There's still a huge amount of trade between us, even in the middle of a pandemic. And there's still a huge necessity for us to work together. But at the same time, I will tell you, there is a level of mistrust in the relationship.
Yeah.
It's almost like we need to go to a marriage counselor. We need a weekend retreat together.
Yes.
Get out of the public view, sit down, we hear your grievances, we hear your bottom lines, you hear our grievances, our bottom lines, not just a 1 hour, 2 hour meeting between world leaders. I mean, I'm talking about a deep dive where, you know, where China's Secretary of State and National Security Team and Economic Team and America's literally go off to Hainan Island or Hawaii or wherever and spend a week together, really just saying what is bothering you. And let me see if what's bothering you I can fix, and maybe you can see if what's bothering me you can fix. But right now we're just, you know, the relationship is just full of angst and anxiety and mistrust, and it's really not healthy, and it's not. The world will be a less prosperous and a less stable place if we can't get over this hump.
Before coming here, I was trying to look at the history a little bit just to match your level of intelligence. I was listening to a speech given by Ronald Reagan when he was first visiting China back in the 1970s, and he was talking about, you know, to an audience in Fudan University in Shanghai, and he said, the first thing he said is a Chinese student studying in the United States that his team talked to before their trip to China.
My staff spoke to him before he left. Mr. Ye wants you to know he's doing fine. He's working hard on his spring term papers, and his thoughts turn to you often. He asked me to deliver a message to his former students, colleagues, friends, and family. He asked me to say for him, and I hope I can, Wo Xiang Nian Da Jia.
I mean, at that point, it was a difficult time. It was a time, even though their political will, but there have been decades of separation between China and the United States, and with the leaders coming out and trying to set an example. So, Tom, I really want to ask you, don't all of us have a responsibility like that to set an example? If some of the politicians don't do that, can we do that?
Well, that's why I want to be on your show. You know, I mean,
I really appreciate that.
I want people in China to know, though, that people like myself who believe in the engagement strategy, which is build bridges where possible, draw red lines where necessary. We are going to disagree and compete on important things, you know, whether it's human rights or business or politics. But people like me and holding my views are you know, not in the ascendant right now. And I could list my grievances. I did in my column. And you could list the grievances from China. Neither of us can really do much about it. But I think the important thing, and my hope, is that when we get a new administration in Washington, that we can do not just a meeting. This relationship, it needs a complete overhaul for the 21st century.
Yes.
We're still operating on some of the principles and ideas going back to the Shanghai Communique. It's a very different relationship. China is not just selling us toys, T-shirts, and tennis shoes. It wants to sell us deep, high-tech items that are all dual-use technologies. America, the same. So we have many deep things to discuss if we're going to propel this relationship in a productive and peaceful way into the 21st century. And we need to, but we're operating on just the fumes, the momentum, basically, of the last 40 years, and it needs a complete reboot. And that you can't do in one summit with a 3-hour scripted meeting between the leaders.
We've been reading your columns and articles over the past few months. Since the start of the pandemic until now, what do you think are some of the biggest lessons we as a whole, human beings, should learn this time?
You know, Wei, I think the most important lesson is that we are all, for the first time, in the grip of Mother Nature. And unless you were alive in 1918, when the last major global pandemic was, you haven't experienced this. And what does it mean to be in the grip of Mother Nature? What it means is that Mother Nature throws these things at us, these challenges. They're called viruses, they're called droughts, they're called floods, they're called wildfires. They're all the challenges she throws at us to see who will be the fittest, which plant or animal or human will get their DNA into the next generation. And what Mother Nature demands when she's throwing these challenges at us, she does not reward the strongest. She does not reward the smartest. She actually only rewards the most adaptive. Who's the most adaptive to my challenge? And she rewards 3 adaptation strategies in particular. She asked every country 3 questions. First, do you respect my virus? Because if you don't respect her power, the power of her virus, she will hurt you or someone you love. Second, she asked, are you coordinated in your adaptation strategy? Because I, Mother Nature, have evolved my virus over millennia to find any crack in your immune system, your individual immune system or your communal immune system. And lastly, she asked, is your adaptation strategy built on chemistry, biology, and physics, or is it built on politics, ideology, and an election schedule? Because if it's not built on chemistry, biology, and physics, because that's all I am, Mother Nature, I'm just chemistry, biology, and physics, and if your adaptation isn't built on that, then I will hurt you and someone you love.
Tom, you know, the World Health Organization had been warning that the worst are yet to come. And we also heard from Dr. Anthony Fauci from the U.S. talking about possibly, if things go really wrong, 100,000 new cases every day. Well, that is a dire situation. But, you know, as a whole, collectively, the world, where is our mark from 1 to 10? How much do you think we should get right now?
You know, what you really see is that it's impossible to give the world a grade because you see basically 3 different adaptation strategies. One is the adaptation strategy adopted by China using all the powers of its state to test, track, trace, and quarantine people. Then you see different versions of that in Germany, in South Korea, in Singapore, New Zealand, etc. That strategy is basically lockdown, test, track, and trace, and wait for a vaccine. We'll control the spread of the disease until we get a vaccine to get herd immunity. Second strategy is Sweden, which is actually to stay partially open, expose their people to the virus, and get natural herd immunity. Hasn't worked entirely perfectly, but I wouldn't judge the Sweden case yet. The third major strategy is the American strategy, which is we talk like we're doing the China approach. We actually act like we're going for Sweden's herd immunity. We're actually preparing for neither, and we're claiming to be superior to both. So our strategy is a complete mess of 50 states, some doing it well, I would say, locking down and then testing, tracking, tracing, and quarantining, and wearing masks and social distancing, and some doing it incredibly poorly. It's very frightening to be here now because you see, you know, this exponential curve now with a pandemic. It can get completely out of control.
You didn't answer my question directly, but I can figure out exactly what your answer is. However, at a time of crisis, throughout history, as you may know very well, it brings the best and it also brings the worst among the human being out. What have you seen over the past half year? Should we be proud of our best? Are we really ashamed and realize it and likely to correct the worst of us?
Historically, Wei, America, in the face of any kind of global challenge, America tended to play three roles. We were the coordinator, kind of the lead global coordinator of the response. We gave aid to those most harmed, and we were a source of scientific knowledge of what is the best approach. And America has not played that role in this pandemic under the Trump administration. And therefore, we've got a very uncoordinated global response. The European Union just announced yesterday that it will not be allowing Americans to come to Europe. So it's obviously China's already closed. We're closed to others. So there has not been a coordinated response. And because of that, our global response is very suboptimal.
Tom, you may know the vaccine certainly should be on the mind of everybody because the science really could help us. And probably that's the only thing that could really help us. However, many experts I've been talking to, I'm sure you have been interacting with as well, have been warning us of inflated hope upon vaccines because time is needed. Meanwhile, exact vaccine for the coronavirus, even after the mutation, could be very challenging. So this is a new normal likely we are going to face. To you, what is the new normal? You've been writing columns about that, but what is your latest understanding of this new normal now?
Well, again, I can only speak about America. There are two kind of cultures in the world, just very generally speaking. There are tight cultures and loose cultures. Cultures that tend to be top-down, respectful of rules and authority, and very order-bound. I'm talking about China, Korea, Germany, Japan. And then there are loose cultures, America, Italy, Spain, the Mediterranean, cultures that don't really follow orders very well, are not very authority-bound, etc. Well, in responding to a pandemic, tight cultures do a lot better than loose cultures. Culturally, Americans can't seem to do this, and we're really failing at the basic challenge. And what is so disturbing to me, and again, I'm caught up with my own country right now, is that Donald Trump will not be judged as president for what he didn't do or did do early on. Early on, when whatever you did was hard, it was uncertain, and widely debated. What he is being judged harshly for is what he's doing now in June. In June, when the right response is clear, scientifically proven, and easy. Just have every person wear a mask anywhere in public, socially distance, trace, track, and test, and protect the most vulnerable. We know exactly what to do. And what's so frightening from an American's point of view, and to any friend of America out in the world, is we can't agree on doing this easy stuff.
But Tom, is it just the president's problem? I mean, particularly this president's problem. Within the system, for example, can Congress act? Can they enforce also with their own power, utmost power? In the states, different states, there are those who are doing much better job than the others. So obviously you see across the board, there are those who should be responsible that have been not, and there are those who are responsible and have been exactly doing it, isn't it?
Yes, but the problem is that yes, we have a federal system, and states and localities, mayors have a great deal of autonomy, okay? And that's good when you're dealing with economics, maybe politics. But when you're dealing with a virus that spreads silently, mercilessly, and exponentially, and does not know where the border between Florida and Georgia is, or Oklahoma and Texas, having a 50-state strategy really doesn't work. And you see it coming apart right now, because these massive accelerations of the spread of the virus in the South, and people fly from the South to the North, or they drive to meet their families.
Exactly.
It won't stay in the South. So when you're up against a virus like this, you need, as I said in the beginning, you need to be coordinated. And we're not.
And I want to thank you for joining us on this discussion, Tom. I know you have a very long day, and also your columns have been very brave in expressing your views, which echoes worldwide. Thank you so much. Thomas Friedman, columnist from the New York Times. Really appreciate it, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.